Preliminary Discourse of the Comic English Grammar. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding. The Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. Preliminary Discourse. Fashion requires, and like the rest of her sex, requires because she requires, that before a writer begins the business of his book, he should give an account to the world of his reasons for producing it; and therefore, to avoid singularity, we shall proceed with the statement of our own, excepting only a few private ones, which are neither here nor there. To advance the interests of mankind by promoting the cause of education, to ameliorate the conversation of the masses, to cultivate taste and diffuse refinement. These are the objects we have in view in submitting a comic English grammar to the patronage of a discerning public. Few persons there are whose ears are so extremely obtuse as not to be frequently annoyed at the violations of grammar by which they are so often assailed. It is really painful to be forced, in walking along the streets, to hear such phrases as "that 'ere omnibus," "where've you been?" "Vot's the odds?" and the like. Very dreadful expressions are also used by cartmen and others in addressing their horses. What can possibly induce a human being to say "Gee woot!" "Mother way!" or "Whoa!" not to mention the atrocious "Kim up!" of the barbarous butcher's boy? It is notorious that the above and greater enormities are perpetrated in spite of the number of grammars already before the world. This fact sufficiently excuses the present addition to the stock; and as serious English grammars have hitherto failed to effect the desired reformation, we are induced to attempt it by means of a comic one. With regard to the moral tendency of our labours, we may be here permitted to remark that they will tend, if successful, to the suppression of evil speaking; and as the Spartans used to exhibit a tipsy slave to their children, with a view to disgust them with drunkenness, so we, by giving a few examples here and there of incorrect phraseology, shall expose in their naked deformity the vices of speech to the ingenious reader. The comical mind, like the jaundiced eye, views everything through a coloured medium. Such a mind is that of the generality of our countrymen. We distinguish even the nearest ties of relationship by facetious names. Section 1 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 1. Orthography. Chapter 1. Of the nature of the letters and of a comic alphabet. Orthography is like a schoolmaster or instructor of youth. It teaches us the nature and powers of letters, and the right method of spelling words. Comic orthography teaches us the oddity and absurdities of letters, and the wrong method of spelling words. The following is an example of comic orthography.
Islington, 14th of February, 1844. My dear Jeemes, when fust I sawed you down the middle and up again at the ball, I made up my mind to secure you for my own, for I felt at once that my happiness was at stake, and a sensation in my bosom I couldn't no ways account for. And I said to Mary at Mrs. Higgins's, said I, "There's the man for my money." "Oh," says she, "I knows a sweeter young man than that." "Eh, do you?" says I again. "Then there we agree to differ." And we was sitting by the window, and we was wery near falling out. My dear Jeemes, since that night I haven't slept a wink, and what is more to the paupers, I have quite lost my happytite, and am getting wuss and wuss, which I think you ought to pity me. I'm told every day that I'm getting thinner, and a gipsy said that nothing would cure me but a ring. I was a long time making my mind up to write to you, for of course I says Jeemes will think me too forrard, but this being leap year,
Section 2 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 1, A Comical View of the Parts of Speech. Etymology teaches the varieties, modifications, and derivation of words. The derivation of words means that which they come from as words. For what they come from as sounds is another matter. Some words come from the heart, and then they are pathetic. Others from the nose, in which case they are ludicrous. The funniest place, however, from which words can come is the stomach. By the way, the mayor would do well to keep a ventriloquist from whom at a moment's notice he might ascertain the voice of the corporation. Comic etymology teaches us the varieties, modifications, and derivation of words invested with a comic character. Grammatically speaking, we say that there are in English as many sorts of words as a cat is said to have lives, 9, namely the article, the substantive or noun, the adjective, the pronoun, the verb, the adverb, the preposition, the conjunction, and the interjection. Comically speaking, there are a great many sorts of words which we have not room enough to particularize individually. We can, therefore, only afford to classify them. For instance, there are words which are spoken in the Low Countries and are High Dutch to persons of quality. Words in use amongst all those who have to do with horses. Words that pass between rival cabmen. Words spoken in a state of intoxication. Words uttered under excitement. Words of endearment addressed by parents to children in arms. Similar words, sometimes called burning, tender, soft, and broken words, addressed to young ladies, and whispered, lisped, sighed, or drawled, according to circumstances. Words of honour, as tailors' words and shoemakers' words, which, like the above-mentioned, or lovers' words, are very often broken. With many other sorts of words which will be readily suggested by the reader's fancy. But now let us go on with the parts of speech. 1. An article is a word prefixed to substantives to point them out, and to show the extent of their meaning, as a dandy, an ape, the simpleton. One kind of comic article is otherwise denominated an oddity, or queer article. Another kind of comic article is often to be met with in some of our monthly magazines. 2. A substantive or noun is the name of anything that exists, or of which we have any notion. As tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor, apothecary, ploughboy, thief. Now, the above definition of a substantive is Lindley Murray's, not ours. We mention this because we have an objection, though not perhaps a serious one, to urge against it. For in the first place we have no notion of impudence, and yet impudence is a substantive. And in the second, we invite attention to the following piece of logic. A substantive is something, but nothing is a substantive. Therefore, nothing is something. A substantive may generally be known by its taking an article before it, and by its making sense of itself, as a treat, the mullygrubs, an ache. 3. An adjective is a word joined to a substantive to denote its quality, as a ragged regiment, an odd set. You may distinguish an adjective by its making sense with the word thing, as a poor thing, a sweet thing, a cool thing, or with any particular substantive, as a ticklish position, an awkward mistake, a strange step. 4. A pronoun is a word used in lieu of a noun in order to avoid tautology, as the man wants calves, he is a lath, he is a walking stick. 5. A verb is a word which signifies to be, to do, or to suffer, as I am, I calculate, I am fixed. A verb may usually be distinguished by its making sense with a personal pronoun, or with the word to before it, as I yell, he grins, they caper, or to drink, to smoke, to chew. Fashionable accomplishments. Certain substantives are, with peculiar elegance, and by persons who call themselves genteel, converted into verbs, as do you wine? Will you liquor? 6. An adverb is a part of speech which, joined to a verb, an adjective, or another adverb, serves to express some quality or circumstance concerning it, as she swears dreadfully, she is incorrigibly lazy, and she is almost continually in liquor. 7. An adverb is generally characterized by answering to the question how much, when, or where. As in the verse, "Merrily danced the Quaker's wife," the answer to the question, how did she dance, is merrily. 8. Prepositions serve to connect words together and to show the relation between them, as off with his head, so much for Buckingham. 9. A conjunction is used to connect not only words, but sentences also, as Smith and Jones are happy because they are single. A miss is as good as a mile. 10. An interjection is a short word denoting passion or emotion, as "Oh, Sophonisba, Sophonisba, oh!" Pshaw! Pish! Pooh! Bah! Ah! Oh! Ooh! Yaw! Ha! Look! La! Law! Hey ho! Well! There! Etc. Among the foregoing interjections there may perhaps be some unhonoured by the adoption of genius, and unknown in the domains of literature. For the present notice of them some apology may be required, but little will be given. Their insertion may excite astonishment, but their omission would have provoked complaint. Though unprovided with a Johnsonian title to a place in the English vocabulary, they have long been recognised by the popular voice, and let it be remembered that as custom supplies the defects of legislation, so that which is not sanctioned by magisterial authority may, nevertheless, be justified by vernacular usage. End of section 2. Section 3 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 2, of the Articles. The articles in English are two, a and the. A becomes an before a vowel, and before an h which is not sounded, as an exquisite, an hourglass. But if the h be pronounced, the a only is used, as a homicide, a homeopathist, a hum. A or an is called the indefinite article because it is used, in a vague sense, to point out some one thing belonging to a certain kind, but in other respects indeterminate, as a horse, my kingdom for a horse. So say grammarians. Eating-house keepers tell a different story. A cheese, in common discourse, means an object of a certain shape, size, weight, and so on, entire and perfect. So that to call half a cheese would constitute a flaw in an indictment against a thief who had stolen one. But a waiter will term a fraction or a modicum of cheese a cheese, a plateful of pudding a pudding, and a stick of celery a salary. Here we are reminded of the famous exclamation of one of these gentry, "Sir, there's 2 teas and a brandy and water just sloped without paying." The is termed the definite article, inasmuch as it denotes what particular thing or things are meant, as, "The miller he stole corn, the weaver he stole yarn, and the little tailor he stole broadcloth to keep the three rogues warm." A substantive to which no article is prefixed is taken in a general sense, as, "Apple sauce is proper for goose," that is, for all geese. A few additional remarks may advantageously be made with respect to the articles. The mere substitution of the definite for the indefinite article is capable of changing entirely the meaning of a sentence. "That is a ticket" is the assertion of a certain fact. "That is the ticket" means something which is quite different. The article is not prefixed to a proper name, as Stubbs, Wiggins, Brown, or Hobson, except for the sake of distinguishing a particular family or description of persons, as, "He is a Burke," that is, one of the Burkes, or a person resembling Burke. The definite article is frequently used with adverbs in the comparative and superlative degree, as, "The longer I live, the taller I grow," or, as we have all heard the showman say, "This here, gentlemen and ladies, is the wonderful heagle of the sun. The otterer it grows, the higherer he flies." End of section 3. Section 4 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 3, Section 1 of Substantives in General. Substantives are either proper or common. Proper names or substantives are the names belonging to individuals, as William, Birmingham. These are sometimes converted into nicknames or improper names, as Bill, Brummagem. Common names or substantives denote kinds containing many sorts, or sorts containing many individuals under them, as brute, beast, bumpkin, cherub, infant, goblin, etc. Proper names, when an article is prefixed to them, are employed as common names, as, "They thought him a perfect Chesterfield." "He quite astonished the Browns." Common names, on the other hand, are made to denote individuals by the addition of articles or pronouns, as, "There was a little man, and he had a little gun." "That boy will be the death of me." Substantives are considered according to gender, number, and case. They are all of the third person when spoken of, and of the second when spoken to, as, "Matilda, fairest maid, who art in countless bumpers toasted, O let thy pity baste the heart thy fatal charms have roasted." Section 2 of Gender. The distinction between nouns with regard to sex is called gender: the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. Section 5 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 4, of Adjectives. Section 1, of the nature of adjectives and the degrees of comparison. An English adjective, whatever may be its gender, number, or case, like a rusty weathercock, never varies. Thus we say, a certain cabinet, certain rogues. But as a rusty weathercock may vary in being more or less rusty, so an adjective varies in the degrees of comparison. The degrees of comparison, like the genders, the graces, the fates, the kings of Cologne, the weird sisters, and many other things, are three: the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. The positive state simply expresses the quality of an object, as fat, ugly, foolish. The comparative degree increases or lessens the signification of the positive, as fatter, uglier, more foolish, less foolish. The superlative degree increases or lessens the positive to the highest or lowest degree, as fattest, ugliest, most foolish, least foolish. Amongst the ancients, Ulysses must have been the fattest, because nobody could compass him. Aristides the Just was the ugliest, because he was so very plain. The most foolish, undoubtedly, was Homer, for who was more natural than he? The positive becomes the comparative by the addition of r or er, and the superlative by the addition of st or est to the end of it, as brown, browner, brownest; stout, stouter, stoutest; heavy, heavier, heaviest; wet, wetter, wettest. The adverbs more and most prefixed to the adjective also form the superlative degree, as heavy, more heavy, most heavy. Monosyllables are usually compared by er and est, and dissyllables by more and most, except dissyllables ending in y or in le before a mute, or those which are accented on the last syllable, for these, like monosyllables, easily admit of er and est. But these terminations are scarcely ever used in comparing words of more than two syllables. We have some words which, from custom, are irregular in respect of comparison, as good, better, best; bad, worse, worst, etc. But the Yankees' notion of comparison was decidedly funny. My uncle's a tarnation rogue, but I'm a tarnationer. Section 2. A few remarks on the subject of comparison. Lindley Murray judiciously observes that, "if we consider the subject of comparison attentively, we shall perceive that the degrees of it are infinite in number, or at least indefinite." And he proceeds to say, "A mountain is larger than a mite, by how many degrees? How much bigger is the earth than a grain of sand? By how many degrees was Socrates wiser than Alcibiades? Or by how many is snow whiter than this paper? It is plain," quoth Lindley, "that to these and the like questions no definite answers can be returned." No, but an impertinent one may. Ask the first newsboy you meet any one of these questions, and see if he does not immediately respond, "Ax my eye," or "as much again as half." But when quantity can be exactly measured, the degrees of excess may be exactly ascertained. A foot is just 12 times as long as an inch. A tailor is 9 times less than a man. Moreover, to compensate for the indefiniteness of the degrees of comparison, we use certain adverbs and words of like import, whereby we render our meaning tolerably intelligible, as Byron was a much greater poet than Muggins. Honey is a great deal sweeter than wax. Sugar is considerably more pleasant than the cane. Maria says that Dick the butcher is by far the most killing young man she knows. The words very, exceedingly, and the like, placed before the positive, give it the force of the superlative, and this is called by some the superlative of eminence, as distinguished from the superlative of comparison. Thus, very reverend is termed the superlative of eminence, although it is the title of a dean, not of a cardinal, and most reverend, the appellation of an archbishop, is called the superlative of comparison. A bishop, in our opinion, is most excellent. The comparative is sometimes so employed as to express the same preeminence or inferiority as the superlative. For instance, the sentence, "Of all the cultivators of science, the botanist is the most crafty," has the same meaning as the following, "The botanist is more crafty than any other cultivator of science." Why, some of our readers will ask? Because he is acquainted with all sorts of plants. End of section 5. Section 6 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 5 of Pronouns. Pronouns or proxy nouns are of three kinds, namely the personal, the relative, and the adjective pronouns. Note that when we said some few pages back that a pronoun was a word used instead of a noun, we did not mean to call such words as thingamabob, what's-a-name, what do you call it, and the like, pronouns; and that although we shall proceed to treat of the pronouns in the English language, we shall have nothing to do at present with what some people please to call pronounciation. Section 1 of the Personal Pronouns.
Mr. Adams, don't be personal, sir. I'm not, sir. You am, sir. What did I say, sir? Tell me that. You reflected on my profession, sir. You said as there was some people as always stuck up for the cloth, and you insinuated that certain parties dined off goose by means of cabbaging from their customers. I ask any gentleman in the room if that ain't personal. Vell, sir, what I says I'll stick to. Yes, sir, like vax, as the saying is. What do you mean by that, sir? What I say, sir. You're an individual, sir. You're another, sir. You're no gentleman, sir. You're a humbug, sir. You're a knave, sir. You're a rogue, sir. You're a vagabond, sir. You're a villain, sir. You're a tailor, sir. You're a cobbler, sir. Order, order, chair, chair, etc.
The above is what is called personal language. How many different things one word serves to express in English! A pronoun may be as personal as possible, and yet nobody will take offence at it. There are 5 personal pronouns, namely I, thou, he, she, it, with their plurals we, ye, or you, they. Personal pronouns admit of person, number, gender, and case. Pronouns have 3 persons in each number. In the singular, I is the first person, thou is the second person, he, she, or it is the third Section 7 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 6, Verbs. Section 1 of the Nature of Verbs in General. The nature of verbs in general, and that in all languages, is that they are the most difficult things in the grammar. Verbs are divided into active, passive, and neuter, and also into regular, irregular, and defective. To these divisions we beg to add another, verbs comic. A verb active implies an agent and an object acted upon, as to love. I love Wilhelmina Stubbs. Here I am the agent, that is, the lover, and Wilhelmina Stubbs is the object acted upon, or the beloved object. A verb passive expresses the suffering, feeling, or undergoing of something, and therefore implies an object acted upon, and an agent by which it is acted upon, as to be loved. Wilhelmina Stubbs is loved by me. A verb neuter expresses neither action nor passion, but a state of being, as I bounce, I lie. Of verbs regular, irregular, and defective, we shall have somewhat to say hereafter. Verbs comic are, for the most part, verbs which cannot be found in the dictionary, and are used to express ordinary actions in a jocular manner, as to bolt, to mizzle, which signify to go or to depart; to bone, to prig, that is to say, to steal; to collar, which means to seize, an expression probably derived from the mode of prehension, or rather apprehension, characteristic of the new police, as it is one very much in the mouths of those who most frequently come in contact with that body; to liquor or drink; to grub or eat; to sell or deceive, etc. Under the head of verbs comic, the Yankeeisms, I calculate, I reckon, I realise, I guess, and the like, may also be properly enumerated. Auxiliary or helping verbs. By the way, we marvel that the New Englanders do not call their servants auxiliaries instead of helps, are those by the help of which we are chiefly enabled to conjugate our verbs in English. They are do, be, have, shall, will, may, can, with their variations, and let and must, which have no variation. Let, however, when it is anything but a helping verb, as for instance when it signifies to hinder, makes lettist and letteth. The phrase this house to let, generally used instead of to be let, meaning in fact the reverse of what is intended to convey, is really a piece of comic English. To verbs belong number, person, mood, and tense. These may be called the properties of a verb, and like those of opium, they are soporiferous properties. There are two very important objects which the writer of every book has, or ought to have, in view, to get a reader who is wide awake, and to keep him so; the latter of which, when number, person, mood, and tense are to be treated of, is no such easy matter, seeing that the said writer is then in some danger of going to sleep himself. Never mind. If we nod, let the reader wink. What can't be cured must be endured. Section 2 of Number and Person. Verbs have two numbers, the singular and the plural, as I fiddle, we fiddle, Section 8 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 7, Adverbs. Having as great a dislike as the youngest of our readers can have to repetitions, we shall not say what an adverb is over again. It is nevertheless right to observe that some adverbs are compared, as far, farther, farthest, near, nearer, nearest. In comparing those which end in ly, we use more and most, as slowly, more slowly, most slowly. There are a great many adverbs in the English language. Their number is probably even greater than that of abusive epithets. They are divisible into certain classes, the chief of which are number, order, place, time, quantity, manner or quality, doubt, affirmation, negation, interrogation, and comparison. A nice little list, truly, and perhaps some of our readers may suppose that we are going to exemplify it at length. If so, all we can say with regard to their expectation is that we wish they may get it gratified. In the meantime, we will not turn our grammar into a dictionary to please anybody. However, we have no objection to a brief illustration of the uses and properties of adverbs as contained in the following passage. Formerly, when first I began to preach and teach, whithersoever I went, the little boys followed me, and now and then pelted me with brickbats, as heretofore they pelted Ebenezer Grimes, and whensoever I opened my mouth, straightways the ungodly began to crow. Oftentimes was I hit in the mouth with an orange, yea, and once, moreover, with a rotten egg. Whereat there was much laughter, which, notwithstanding, I took in good part, and wiped my face, and looked pleasantly. For, peradventure, I said, they will listen to my sermon. Yea, and after that we may have a collection. So I was nowise discomfited. Wherefore I advise thee, brother Habakkuk, to take no heed of thy persecutors, seeing that I, whereas I was once little better off than thyself, have now a chapel of mine own. And herein let thy mind be comforted, that preach as much as thou wilt against the bishop, thou wilt not therefore in these days be in danger of the pillory. Howbeit, etc. Vide Life of the late pious and reverend Samuel Simcox, Letter to Habakkuk Brown. End of section 8. Section 9 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2, Etymology, Chapter 8 of Prepositions. Prepositions are for the most part put before nouns and pronouns, as out of the frying pan, into the fire. The preposition of is sometimes used as a part of speech of peculiar signification, and one to which no name has as yet been applied, as what you been doing of. At and up are not rarely used as verbs, but we should scarcely have been justified in so classing them by the authority of any polite writer, such use of them being confined to the vulgar, as "Now then, Bill, at him again." So she upped with her fists and fetched him a whop. After is improperly pronounced arter, and against agin, as "Hello, Jim, what are you arter? Don't you know that here's agin the law?" Chapter 9 of Conjunctions. A conjunction means literally a union or meeting together. An ill-assorted marriage is a comical conjunction. But our conjunctions are used to connect words and sentences, and have nothing to do with the joining of hands. They are chiefly of two sorts, the copulative and disjunctive. The copulative conjunction is employed for the connection or continuation of a sentence, as Jack and Jill went up the hill. I will sing a song if Gubbins will. A thirsty man is like a giant because he is agog for drink. The conjunction disjunctive is used not only for purposes of connection, but also to express opposition of meaning in different degrees, as we pay less for our letters, but shall have to pay more for our coats. They have lightened our postage, but they will increase our taxes. Conjunctions are the hooks and eyes of language, in which, as well as in dress, it is very possible to make an awkward use of them, as, for if the year consist of 365 days, 6 hours, and January have 31 days, then the relation between the corpuscular theory of light and the new views of Mr. Owen is at once subverted. For, when ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Because 1,760 yards make a mile, and it is universally acknowledged that war is the madness of many for the gain of a few, therefore Sir Isaac Newton was right in supposing the diamond to be combustible. The Siamese twins, it must be admitted, form a singular conjunction. A tin pot fastened to a dog's tail is a disagreeable conjunction to the unfortunate animal. A happy pair may be regarded as an uncommon conjunction. The word as, so often used in this and other grammars, is a conjunction, as Mrs. A is as well as can be expected. End of section 9. Section 10 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 2 Etymology, Chapter 10 of Derivation. Those who know Latin, Greek, Saxon, and the other languages from which our own is formed, do not require to be instructed in philological derivation. And on those who do not understand the said tongues, such instruction would be thrown away. In what manner English words are derived one from another, the generality of persons know very well. There are, however, a few words and phrases which it is expedient to trace to their respective sources, not only because such an exercise is of itself delightful to the inquiring mind, but because we shall thereby be furnished, as we hope to show, with a test by means of which, on hearing an expression for the first time, we shall be able in most instances to decide at once respecting its nature and quality. These words, of which many have but recently come into vogue, which, though by no means improper or immoral, are absolutely unutterable in any polite assembly, it is not at first very easy to see what can be the objection to their use, but derivation explains it for us in the most satisfactory manner. The truth is that the expressions in question take their origin from various trades and occupations, in which they have, for the most part, a literal meaning. And we now perceive what horrible suspicions respecting one's birth, habits, and education their figurative employment would be likely to excite. To make the matter indisputably clear, we will explain our position by a few examples. Words and phrases, what derived from. Bone, to steal, derived from butchers. Chisel, to cheat, derived from carpenters. To cut it fat, derived from cooks. To come it strong, derived from publicans. To drop off the hooks, derived from butchers. To be done, derived from cooks. To be done brown, derived from cooks. A sell, a cheat, derived from Jews. To lather, to beat. derived from barbers. To strap, to beat, derived from cobblers. To hide, to beat, derived from curriers. Spicy, showy, derived from grocers. To hang out, to dwell, derived from publicans. Swamped, ruined, derived from watermen. To put one's oar in, to interfere, derived from watermen. Mahogany, for table, derived from upholsterers. Dodge, trick, derived from pickpockets. To bung up an eye, derived from brewers. To chalk down, derived from publicans. A close shaver, a miser, derived from barbers. To be off your feed, derived from ostlers. Hold hard, stop, derived from omnibus men. Numerous examples similar to the foregoing will no doubt present themselves in addition to the mind of the enlightened student. We have not, however, quite done yet with our remarks on this division of our subject. The intrinsic vulgarity of all modes of speech which may be traced to mean or disreputable persons will, of course, not be questioned. But, and as we have got hold of a nice bone, we may as well get all the marrow we can out of it, the principle which is now under consideration has a much wider range than is apparent at first sight. Now we will suppose a red-hot lover addressing the goddess of his idolatry. By the way, how strange it is that these goddesses should be always having their temples on fire, that a Queen of Hearts should ever be seated on a burning throne. But to return to the lover, he was to say something. Well, then, let A.B. be the lover. He expresses himself thus: Mary, my earthly hopes are centred in you. You need not doubt me. My heart is true as the dial to the sun. Words cannot express how much I love you, nor is my affection an ordinary feeling. It is a more exalted and a more enduring sentiment than that which bears its name. I have done. I am not eloquent. I can say no more than that I deeply and sincerely love you. This, perhaps, will be regarded by connoisseurs as tolerably pathetic, and for the kind of thing not very ridiculous. Now let A.S.S. be the lover, and let us have his version of the same story. Mary, my capital in life is invested in you. You need not stick at giving me credit. My heart is as safe as the bank. The sum total of my love for you defies calculation. Nor is my attachment anything in the common way. It is a superior and more durable article than that in general wear. My stock of words is exhausted. I am no wholesale dealer in that line. All I can say is, that I have a vast fund of unadulterated affection for you. In this effusion, the Stock Exchange, the multiplication table, and the dry goods and grocers' shops have been drawn upon for a clothing to the suitor's ideas. And by an unhappy choice of words, the most delightful and amiable feelings of our nature, without which life would be a desert and man a bear, are invested with a ridiculous disguise. We would willingly enlarge upon the topic which we have thus slightly handled, but we feel that we should, by so doing, entrench too far on the boundaries of rhetoric, to which science, more particularly than to grammar, the consideration of metaphor belongs. Besides which, it is high time to have done with etymology. End of section 10. Section 11 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 3. Syntax. Now then, reader, if you are quite ready, we are. All right. Star, 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 star. The asterisks are intended to stand for a word used in speaking to horses. Don't blush, young ladies, there's not a shadow of harm in it. But as to spelling it, we are as unable to do so as the ostler's boy was, who was thrashed for his ignorance by his father.
Where are we now, coachman? Syntax. The third part of grammar, sir, what treats of the agreement and construction of words in a sentence.
Does a coachman say what for which because he has a licence?
Can't say, ma'am. Drive on, coachman.
And we must drive on, or boil on, or whatever it is the fashion to call getting on in these times. A sentence is an aggregate of words forming a complete sense. Sentences are of two kinds, simple and compound. A simple sentence has in it but one subject and one finite verb. That is a verb to which number and person belong, as a joke is a joke. A compound sentence consists of two or more simple sentences connected together, as a joke is a joke, but a ducking is no joke. Corpulence is the attribute of swine, mares, and oxen. Simple sentences may be divided, if we choose to take the trouble, into the explicative or explaining, the interrogative or asking, the imperative or commanding. An explicative sentence is, in other words, a direct assertion, as, "Sir, you are impertinent." Johnson. An interrogative sentence merely asks a question, as, "Are you a policeman? How's your inspector?" An imperative sentence is expressive of command, exhortation, or entreaty, as,
Shoulder arms. Turn out your toes. Charge bayonets.
A phrase is two or more words properly put together, making either a sentence or part of a sentence, as, "Good morning. You're most obedient." Some phrases consist of two or more words improperly put together. These are improper phrases, as,
Now then, old stupid. Stand out of the sunshine.
other phrases consist of words put together by ladies, as,
A duck of a man, a love of a shawl, so nice, quite refreshing, sweetly pretty. Did you ever? No, I never.
Other phrases, again, consist of French and English words put together by people of quality, because their knowledge of both languages is pretty nearly equal, as, I am au désespoir, mis hors de combat,
Quite ennuyé.
or rather, in 9 cases out of 10,
Ennuyé.
I have a great envie to do so and so. These constitute an important variety of comic English. If you want to know what subjects and objects are, you should go to the Morgue at Paris. But in grammar, the subject is the thing chiefly spoken of, the attribute is that which is affirmed or denied of it, and the object is the thing affected by such action. The nominative denotes the subject and usually goes before the verb or attribute, and the word or phrase denoting the object follows the verb, as, the flirt torments her lover. Here a flirt is the subject, torment the attribute or thing affirmed, and her lover the object. It strikes us, though, that we are somewhat digressing from our subject, namely syntax, which principally consists of two parts, which the flirt does not, for she is all body and no soul, concord and government. Concord is the agreement which one word has with another, in gender, number, case, or person. Note that a want of agreement between words does not invalidate deeds. We apprehend that such an engagement as the following, properly authenticated, would hold good in law.
I owes John Stubbs $200 for value received. and promised to pay him next Saturday. Signed, Willum Gibbs is X Mark. March 18, 1844. Also, that a friend of ours, to whom the following bill was sent, could not have refused to discharge it on the score of its incorrect grammar. January 10, 1835. Mr. to J. Burton. Repairing of 2 tables and muex stand, $1. Altern of 2 blinds and tool roller, 50 cents, etc. Newport boards, barras and skirting, etc. Stapple, 150. Locks to cupboard doors, and easing dough, laying down flour cloth, and fighting up top of butt, 175. Fixing leather to, and cutting of sheeters indoors in parlour, first flour, 120. Fixing webbing to stand, and fixing legs to washing stool, 38 cents. Fighting up front of dustbin and cupboard on landing, altern lock of cellar door, 50 cents. $6.83. Government is that power which one part of speech has over another, in directing its mood, tense, or case. Government is also that power of which, if the agrarians have their way, we shall soon see very little in this country. Hurrah! No taxes, no army, no navy, no parsons, no lawyers, no Congress, no legislature, no anything, no nothing. To produce the agreement and right disposition of words in a sentence, the following rules and observations should be carefully studied. Rule 1. A verb must agree with its nominative case in number and person, as I perceive, thou hast been to Boston, apes chatter, Frenchmen gabble. Certain liberties are sometimes taken with this rule, as I own I likes good beer. You, my fine fellow, ain't you? Such modes of speaking are adopted by those who neither know nor care anything about grammatical correctness, but there are other persons who care a great deal about it, but unfortunately do not know what it consists in. Such folks are very fond of saying, "How it rain! It fit you very well. He say he think it very unbecoming. I were gone before you was come," and so forth, in which forms of speech they perceive a peculiar elegance. The infinitive mood, or part of a sentence, is sometimes used as the nominative case to the verb, as to be good is to be happy, which is as grammatical an assertion as Toby good is Toby happy, and rather surpasses it in respect of sense. That 2 pippins are a pair is a proposition which no man in his senses will deny. To be a connoisseur in boots, to hate all rational pursuits, to make your money fly, as though gold would as fast as mushrooms grow, to haunt the opera, save whene'er there's anything worth hearing there, to smirk, to smile, to bow, to dance, to talk of what they eat in France, to languish, simper, sue, and sigh, and stuff her head with flattery, are means to gain that worthless part, a fashionable lady's heart. Here are examples enough, in all conscience, of infinitive moods serving as nominative cases. All verbs, save only in the infinitive mood or participle, require a nominative case either expressed or understood, as row with me down the river, that is, row thou, or do thou row. Come where the aspens quiver, come thou, or do thou come. Fly not yet, fly not thou, or do not thou fly. Pass the ruby, pass thou, or do thou pass the ruby, not the Rubicon. A well-known popular song affords an example of the violation of this rule. Ven as the captain comed for to hear on't, very much applauded what she'd done.
The verb applauded has here no nominative case, whereas it ought to have been governed by the pronoun he. He very much applauded, etc. Every nominative case, except when made absolute, or used like the Latin vocative in addressing a person, should belong to some verb, implied if not expressed. A beautiful example of this grammatical maxim, and one too that explains itself, is impressed upon the mind very soon after its first introduction to letters, as "Who killed Cock Robin? I," said the sparrow, "with my bow and arrow. I killed Cock Robin." Of the neglect of this rule also, the ballad lately mentioned presents an instance, as "420 brisk young fellows, clad in jackets blue array, and they took poor Billy Taylor from his true love all away." The only verb in these 4 lines is the verb took, which is governed by the pronoun they. The 24 brisk young fellows, therefore, though undeniably in the nominative, have no verb to belong to, while at the same time, whatever may be thought of their behaviour to Mr. William Taylor, they are certainly not absolute in point of case. When a verb comes between 2 nouns, either of which may be taken as the subject of the affirmation, it may agree with either of them, as, 2 and 6pence is half a crown. Due regard, however, should be paid to that noun which is most naturally the subject of the verb. It would be clearly wrong to say, "Ducks and green peas is a delicacy." "Fleas is a nuisance." A nominative case standing without a personal tense of a verb, and being put before a participle independently of the rest of the sentence, is called a case absolute; as, "My brethren, to-morrow being Sunday, I shall preach a sermon in John Street, after which we shall join in a hymn, and that having been sung, Brother Biggs will address you." The objective case is sometimes incorrectly made absolute by showmen and others; as, "Here, gentlemen and ladies, you will see that great warrior Napoleon Bonaparte, standing agin a tree with his hands in his breeches pockets, him taking good care to keep out of harm's way. And there on the extreme right you will observe the Dukey Wellington, a-walking about amidst the red-hot cannon balls, him not caring von straw." End of section 11. Section 12 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 3, Syntax, Rules 2 to 15. Rule 2. 2 or more singular nouns, joined together by a copulative conjunction, expressed or understood, are equivalent to a plural noun, and therefore require verbs, nouns, and pronouns agreeing with them in the plural number; as, veal, wine, and Section 13 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 3, Syntax, Rules 16 to 22. Rule 16. Two English negatives, like French lovers, destroy one another and become equivalent to an affirmative, as the question before the house was not an unimportant one. That is, it was an important one. Mr. Brown was free to confess that he did not undertake to say that he would not on some future occasion give a satisfactory answer to the honourable gentleman. Thus, at one and the same time, we teach our readers syntax and secretiveness. It is probable that small boys are often unacquainted with this rule, for many of them, while undergoing personal chastisement, exclaim, for the purpose, as it would appear, of causing its duration to be shortened,
"Oh, pray, sir! Oh, pray, sir! Oh, pray, sir! I won't do so no more."
Rule 17. Prepositions govern the objective case, as, "What did the butcher say of her?" "He said that she would never do for him, that she was too thin for a wife, and he was not fond of a spare rib." The delicate ear is much offended by any deviation from this rule, as in a shocking and vulgar song which it was once our misfortune to hear. "There I found the faithless she, frying sausages for he." We had occasion in the etymology to remark on a certain misuse of the preposition of. This perhaps is best explained by stating that of, in the instances cited, is made to usurp the government of cases which are already under a rightful jurisdiction, as, "What are you got a eating of?" "He had been a beating of his wife." Rule 18. Conjunctions connect similar moods and tenses of verbs, and cases of nouns and pronouns, as, "A coat of arms suspended on a wall is like an executed traitor. It is hanged, drawn, and quartered." If you continue thus to drink brandy and water and to smoke cigars, you will be like Boreas, the north wind, who takes cold without wherever he goes, and always blows a cloud when it comes in his way. Do you think there is anything between him and her? Yes, he and she are engaged ones. Note, to ask whether there is anything between two persons of opposite sexes is one way of inquiring whether they are in love with each other. It is not, however, in our opinion, a very happy phrase, inasmuch as whatever intervenes between a couple of fond hearts must tend to prevent them from coming together. Rule 19. Some conjunctions govern the indicative, some the subjunctive mood. In general, it is right to use the subjunctive when contingency or doubt is implied, as, "If I were to say that the moon is made of green cheese," "If I were a wiseacre," "If I were a Wiltshire man." A lady, unless she be toasted, is never drunk. And when she is toasted, those who are drunk are generally the gentlemen. Those conjunctions which have a positive and absolute signification require the indicative mood, as, "He who fasts may be compared to a horse, for as the animal eats not a bit, so neither does the man partake of a morsel." The rustic is deluded by false hopes, for his daily food is gammon. Every philosopher has his weak points, and in the Silva Silvarum may be found some gammon of Bacon. Rule 20. When a comparison is made between two or more things, the latter noun or pronoun is not governed by the conjunction than or as, but agrees with the verb, or is governed by the verb or preposition expressed or understood, as, "The French are a lighter people than we," that is, than we are, "and yet we are not so dark as they," that is, as they are. "I should think that they admire me more than them," that is, than they admire them. It is a shame, Martha, you were thinking more of that young officer than me, that is, of me. Sufficient attention is not always paid in discourse to this rule. Thus a schoolboy may be often heard to exclaim, "What did you hit me for, you great fool? You're bigger than me. Hit some one of your own size." "Not fling farther than him. Just can't I, that's all." "You and I have got more marbles than them." Rule 21. An ellipsis or omission of certain words is frequently allowed for the sake of avoiding disagreeable repetitions, and of expressing our ideas in a few words. Instead of saying, "She was a little woman," "She was a round woman," and "She was an old woman," we say, making use of the figure ellipsis, "She was a little, round, and old woman." When, however, the omission of words is productive of obscurity, weakens the sentence, or involves a violation of some grammatical principle, the ellipsis must not be used. It is improper to say, "Puddings fill who fill them." We should supply the word those. "A beautiful leg of mutton and turnips" is not good language. Those who would deserve what they are talking about ought to say, "A beautiful leg of mutton and fine turnips." In common discourse, in which the meaning can be eked out by gestures, signs, and inarticulate sounds, variously modified, the ellipsis is much more liberally and more extensively employed than in written composition. "May I have the pleasure of may constitute an invitation to take wine. "I shall be quite may serve as an answer in the affirmative. "So then, you see, he was you see," is perhaps an intimation that a man has been hanged. "Well, of all the I never," is often tantamount to 3 times as many words expressive of surprise, approbation, or disapprobation, according to the tone in which it is uttered. "Will you will you will do either for "Will you be so impertinent, you scoundrel?" "Will you dare to do so another time?" Or, "Will you, dearest, loveliest, most adorable of your sex, will you consent to make me happy? Will you be mine? Speak, answer, I entreat you. One word from those sweet lips will make me the most fortunate man in existence." There is, however, a kind of ellipsis, which those who indulge in that style of epistolary writing, wherein sentiments of a tender nature are conveyed, will do well to avoid with the greatest care. The ellipsis alluded to is that of the first person singular of the personal pronoun, as instanced in the following model of a billet doux. Camberwell, April 1st, 1844. My dearest Fanny, have not enjoyed the balm of sleep all the livelong night. Encountered last night at the ball the beau ideal of my heart. Never knew what love was till then. Derided the sentiment often, jested at scars because had never felt a wound. Feel at last the power of beauty. Write with a tremulous hand, waver between hope and fear. Hope to be thought not altogether unworthy of regard. Fear to be rejected as having no pretensions to the affections of such unparalleled loveliness. Know not in what terms to declare my feelings. Adore you, worship you, dote on you. Am wrapped up in you. Think but on you. Live but for you. Would willingly die for you. In short, love you. And imploring you to have some compassion on one who is distracted for your sake, remain devotedly yours, T. Tout. Rule 22. A regular and dependent construction should be carefully preserved throughout the whole of a sentence, and all its parts should correspond to each other. There is, therefore, an inaccuracy in the following sentence. Greenacre was more admired, but not so much lamented as Burke. It should be, Greenacre was more admired than Burke, but not so much lamented. Of these two worthies there will be a notice of the following kind in a biographical dictionary to be published 1,000 years hence in America. Greenacre, a celebrated critic, who so cut up a blue-stocking lady of the name of Brown that he did not leave her a leg to stand upon. Burke, a famous orator, whose power of stopping people's mouths was said to be prodigious. It is farther reported of him that he was only once hung up, and that on the occasion of the last speech he ever made. Perhaps it may be said that the rule last stated comprehends all preceding rules, and requires exemplification accordingly. We therefore call the attention of the reader to the following paragraph, requesting him to consider what and how many violations of the maxims of syntax it contains. We teaches, that is, my son and me teaches, the boys English grammar. Tom or Dick have learned something every day, but Harry, what is idler, whom I am sure will never come to no good, for he is always a mitching and doing those kind of things. He was catched but yesterday in a skittle grounds. He only makes his book all dog's ears. I beaty too, pretty smartish, as I ought, you'll say, for to have did. I was going to have sent him away last week, but he somehow got over me as he do always. I've had so much trouble with he, that between you and I, if I was not paid for it, I wouldn't have no more to do with such a boy. There never wasn't a monkey more mischievous than him, and a donkey isn't more stupider, and not half so obstinate as that youngster. The syntax of the interjection has been sufficiently stated under Rule 5. Interjections afford more matter for consideration in a treatise on elocution than they do in a work on grammar, but there is one observation which we are desirous of making respecting them, and which will not, it is hoped, be thought altogether foreign to our present subject. Almost every interjection has a great variety of meanings adapted to particular occasions and circumstances, and indicated chiefly by the tone of the voice. Of this proposition we shall now give a few illustrations, which we would endeavour to render still clearer by the addition of musical notes, but that these would hardly express with adequate exactness the modulations of sound to which we allude. And, besides, we hope to be sufficiently understood without such help. This part of the grammar should be read aloud by the student, or, which is better still, the interjection, where it is possible, should be repeated with the proper intonation by a class, the sentence which gives occasion to it being read by the preceptor. We will select the interjection O as the source from which our examples are to be drawn.
I'll give it to you, you idle dog, I will.
Oh, pray, sir! Oh, pray, sir! Oh, oh, oh! I shall ever have the highest esteem for you, sir, but as to love, that is out of the question. Oh, Matilda!
I say, Jim, look at that chaffinch. There's a shy. Oh, crikey!
Miss Timms, do you admire Lord Byron?
Oh, yes.
What do you think of Rubini's singing?
Oh.
So then, you see, we popped round the corner and caught them just in the nick of time. Oh!
Sir, your behaviour has done you great credit.
Oh! Oats are looking up. Oh!
Honourable members might say what they pleased, but he was convinced for his part that the new Poor Law had given great general satisfaction. Oh, oh! There being now no reason or rule to detain us in the syntax, we shall forthwith advance into prosody, where we shall have something to say not only about rules, but also of measures. End of section 13. Section 14 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 4. Prosody. Prosody consists of two parts, wherefore, although it may be a topic, a head, or subject for discussion, it can never be a point. For a point is that which hath no parts. Besides, there are a great many lines to be considered in the second part of prosody, which treats of versification. The first division teaches the true pronunciation of words, including accent, quantity, emphasis, pause, and tone. Lord Chesterfield's book about manners, which is intended to teach us the proper tone to be adopted in society, may be termed an ethical prosody. Lord Chesterfield may have been a polished gentleman, but Dr. Johnson was of the two the more shining character. Chapter 1. Of Pronunciation. Section 1. Of Accent. Though penetrated ourselves by the desire of imparting instruction, we are far from wishing to bore our readers, and therefore we shall endeavour to repeat nothing here that we have said before. Accent is the marking with a peculiar stress of the voice a particular letter or syllable in a word, in such a manner as to render it more distinct or audible than the rest. Thus, in the word theatre, the stress of the voice should be on the letter E and first syllable the, and in contrary on the first syllable con. How shocking it is to hear people say contrary, theatre. The friends of education will be reminded with regret that an error in the pronunciation of the first of these words is very early impressed on the human mind. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? How many evils, alas, arrive from juvenile associations! Words of two syllables never have more than one of them accented, except for the sake of peculiar emphasis. Gentlemen, however, whose profession it is to drive certain public vehicles called cabs, are much accustomed to disregard this rule, and to say polite or perlite, genteel, concern, police, and so on. Nay, they go so far as to convert a word of one syllable into two, for the sake of indulging in this style of pronunciation, and thus the word queer is pronounced by them as queer. The word amen, when standing alone, should be pronounced with two accents. The accents in which it usually is pronounced are very inelegant. Clerks nowadays, alas, are no scholars. Dissyllables formed by adding a termination usually have the former syllable accented, as foolish, blockhead, etc. The accent in dissyllables formed by prefixing a syllable to the radical word is commonly on the latter syllable, as I protest, I declare, I entreat, I adore, I expire. Protestations, declarations, entreaties, and adorations proclaim a swain to be simply tender, but expiration for love proves him to be decidedly soft. A man who turns lover becomes a Protestant, and his conduct at the same time generally undergoes a reformation, especially if he has previously been a rake. The zeal, however, of a reformed rake, like that of Jack in Dean Swift's Tale of a Tub, is sometimes apt to outrun his discretion. When the same word, being a dissyllable, is both a noun and a verb, the verb has mostly the accent on the latter and the noun on the former syllable, as Molly, let Hymen's gentle hand cement our hearts together, with such a cement as shall stand in spite of wind and weather. I do presage, and oft a fact a presage doth foretoken, our mutual love shall ne'er contract, our contract ne'er be broken. There are many exceptions to the rule just enunciated, so that correctly as well as familiarly speaking it is perhaps no rule. For though verbs seldom have an accent on the former, yet nouns frequently have it on the latter syllable : as, Mary Ann is my delight, Both by day and eke by night. For by day her soft control Soothes my heart and calms my soul. And her image while I doze Comes to sweeten my repose. Fortune favouring my design, Please the pigs, she shall be mine. The former syllable of most dissyllables ending in y, our, ow, le, ish, ck, ter, age, en, et is accented, as granny, noodle, etc. Except Section 15 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 4, Prosody, Chapter 2 of Versification. It is with peculiar pleasure that we approach this part of prosody. We belong to a class of persons to whom a celebrated phrenological manipulator ascribes some poetical feeling, if studied or called forth. And to borrow another expression from the same quarter, we sometimes versify a little. That is to say, we diversify our literary occupations by an occasional flirtation with the Muses. We have a great respect for the memory of our old schoolmaster, notwithstanding which we think we can beat him, which we shall be told by the wags would Section 16 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 4, Prosody. Chapter 3, Punctuation. Mind your stops. This is one of the earliest maxims inculcated by the instructors of youth. Hence it is clear that the subject of punctuation is an important one, but inasmuch as the reader who has arrived at the present page has either not understood a word that he has been reading, or else knows as much about the matter as we can tell him, we fear that a long dissertation concerning periods, commas, and so on, would only serve to embarrass his progress in learning with useless stops. We shall therefore confine ourselves to that notice of punctuation, and that only, which the peculiar nature of our work may require. First, it may be remarked that the notes of admiration, which we so often hear in theatres, may be called notes of hand. Secondly, that notes of interrogation are not at all like bank notes, although they are largely uttered in banco reginae. Let us now proceed with our subject. Punctuation is the soul of grammar, as punctuality is that of business. Perhaps somebody or other may take advantage of what we have said to prove both punctuation and punctuality immaterial. No matter, it is both absurd and inconvenient to stand upon points. Of how much consequence, however, punctuation is, the student may form some idea by considering the different effects which a piece of poetry, for instance, which he has been accustomed to regard as sublime or beautiful, will have when liberties are taken with it in that respect. Imagine an actor commencing Hamlet's famous soliloquy thus: "To be, or not to be, that is, the question," etc. Or saying in the person of Duncan in Macbeth, "This castle hath a pleasant seat, the air." Or as the usurper himself exclaiming, "The devil damn thee black, thou cream-faced loon! Where got'st thou that goose? Look!" Crying as Romeo, "It is my lady, oh! It is my love!" Or in the character of Norval in the tragedy of Douglas, giving this account of himself and his origin: "My name is Norval. On the Grampian hills my father feeds." We have now said as much as we think it necessary to say on the head of English grammar. We shall conclude our labours with an address to young students, and as to the question what that has to do with our subject, we shall leave it to be settled by Lindley Murray, whose example in this respect we follow. All we shall observe is that, in our opinion, advice concerning manners stand in the same relation to a comic English grammar as instruction in morals does to a serious one. For the remarks which it will now be our business to make, we bespeak the indulgence of our elder readers and the attention of such as are of tender age. End of section 16. Section 17 of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Address to young students. Young gentlemen, having attentively perused the foregoing pages, you will be desirous, it is to be presumed, of carrying still farther those comical pursuits in which, with both pleasure and profit to yourselves, you have been lately engaged. Should such be your laudable intention, you will learn, with feelings of lively satisfaction, that it is one in the accomplishment of which, thanks to modern taste, you will find encouragement at every step. The literature of the day is professedly comic, and of the few works which are not made ludicrous by the design of their authors, the majority are rendered so in spite of it. In the course of your reading, however, you will be frequently brought into contact with hackney coachmen, cabmen, lackeys, turnkeys, thieves, lawyers' clerks, medical students, and other people of that description, who are all very amusing when properly viewed, as the monkeys and such like animals at the Zoological Gardens are, when you look at them through the bars of their cage. But too great familiarity with persons of this class is sure to breed contempt, not for them and their manners, but for the usages and modes of expression adopted in parlours and drawing-rooms, that is to say, in good society. Nay, it is very likely to cause those who indulge in it to learn various tricks and eccentricities both of behaviour and speech. For "it is certain that either wise bearing or ignorant carriage is caught, as men take diseases one of another." Shakespeare. Beset thus as you will necessarily be by perils and dangers in your wanderings amid the fields of comicality, you will derive great advantage from knowing beforehand what you are likely to meet with, and what it will be incumbent on you to avoid. It is to furnish you with this information that the following hints and instructions are intended. Be careful, when you hear yourself called by name, to reply, "Here I am," and not "Here you are," an error into which you are very likely to be led by the perusal of existing authors. When you partake, if it be your habit to do so, of the beverage called porter, drink it as you would water or any other liquid. Do not wink your eye or nod sideways to your companion. Such actions, especially when preceded by blowing away the foam which collects on the top of the vessel, being exceedingly inelegant. In order that you may not be incommoded by this foam or froth, always pour the fluid gently into a tumbler, instead of drinking it out of the metallic tankard in which it is usually brought to you. In asking for malt liquor generally, never request the waiter to draw it mild. And do not, on any occasion, be guilty of using the same phrase in a metaphorical sense, that is to say, as a substitute for "do it quietly," "be gentle," and the like. Never exhort young ladies during a quadrille to "fake away" or to "flare up," for they, being unacquainted with the meaning of such terms, will naturally conclude that it is an improper one. Avoid inquiries after the health of another person's mother, using that word synonymously with mamma to denote a female parent. Though you may be really innocent of any intention to be rude, your motives may very possibly be misconstrued. Remember also on no account to put questions, either to friends or strangers, respecting the quantity of soap in their possession. Should it be necessary for you to speak of some one smoking tobacco, do not call that substance a weed, or the act of using it blowing a cloud. When an acquaintance pays you a visit, take care in rising to receive him not to appear to be washing your hands, and should you be engaged in writing at the time, place your pen on the table or in the inkstand, and not behind your ear. Observe, when your tailor comes to measure you, the way in which he wears his hair, and should your own style in this particular unfortunate resemble his, be sure to alter it immediately. Never dance à la cuisinière, that is to say, do not cut capers. Eschew large shirt pins. Never say ma'am or miss in addressing a young lady. If you cannot contrive to speak to her without doing so, say nothing. Never, under any circumstances, let the abbreviation gent for gentleman escape the enclosure of your teeth. Above all things, for the sake of whatever you hold most dear, never say me and another gent. When you receive a coin of any kind, deposit it at once in your pocket, without the needless preliminary of furling it in the air. Never ask a gentleman how much he has a year. In speaking of a person of your own age, or of an elderly gentleman, do not say old so-and-so, but so-and-so, or Mr. so-and-so, as the case may be, and have no nicknames for each other. We were much horrified not long since by hearing a great coarse fellow in a leathern hat and fustian jacket exclaim, turning round to his companion, "Now then, come along, old blokey." When you have got a cold in the head and weak eyes, do not go and call on young ladies. Do not eat gravy with a knife, for fear those about you should suppose you to be going to commit suicide. In offering to help a person at dinner, do not say, "Allow me to assist you." When you ask people what wine they will take, never say, "What'll you have?" or "What'll you do it in?" If you are talking to a clergyman about another member of the clerical profession, adopt some other method of describing his avocation than that of saying, "I believe he is in your line." Do not recommend an omelette to a lady as a good article. Be cautious not to use the initial letter of a person's surname in mentioning or in addressing him. For instance, never think of saying, "Mrs. Hobbs, pray how is Mr. H?" Call all articles of dress by their proper names. What delight can be found by a thinking mind in designating a hat as a tile, trousers kicksies, or a neckerchief a fogle or a choker, or a greatcoat an upper benjamin, and never speak of clothes collectively as togs or toggery. We here approach the conclusion of our labours. Young gentlemen, once more it is earnestly requested that you will give your careful attention to the rules and admonitions which have been above laid down for your guidance. We might have given a great many more, but we hope that the spirit of our instructions will enable the diligent youth to supply, by observation and reflection, that which for obvious reasons we have necessarily left unsaid. And now we bid you farewell, that you may never have the misfortune of entering with splashed boots a drawing-room full of ladies, that you may never, having been engaged in a brawl on the previous evening, meet, with a black eye, the object of your affections the next morning, that you may never, in a moment of agitation, omit the aspirate, or use it when you ought not, that your laundress may always do justice to your linen, and your tailor make your clothes well and send them home in due time, that your braces may never give way during a waltz, that you may never, sitting in a strong light at a large dinner party, suddenly remember that you have not shaved for 2 days, that your hands and face may ever be free from tan, chaps, freckles, pimples, brandy blossoms, and all other disfigurements, that you may never be either inelegantly fat or ridiculously lean, and finally, that you may always have plenty to eat, plenty to drink, and plenty to laugh at, we earnestly and sincerely wish. And should your lot in life be other than fortunate, we can only say that we advise you to bear it with patience, to cultivate comic philosophy, and to look upon your troubles as a joke. End of the Comic English Grammar by Percival LEIGH. Recording by Ruth Golding.